Let's talk about the tradecraft that you're going to get as a DeepSeas customer. One of the things that we hear a lot around the halls of security teams is attackers have to be right once, defenders have to be right every time. I would argue that's categorically false. And if that's your approach to the security problem, it really puts you in kind of this losing game of cat and mouse with the attackers. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. What I really want to demonstrate here is that there is a way to invert the scale of return on investment, which is normally in the attacker's favor. There is a way to invert that and put it in the favor of the defenders. So let these dashed lines equal kill chains, right? So in this example, this first line would be something like the initial exploit kit, right onto a host. And this final dashed line would be something that the attacker is after from an actions on objective perspective, maybe data exfil from the environment. And each of these dashes, along the path of the kill chain represents a different tactic, a different technique that they would have to do, to progress in their pursuit of the objectives. And so, as we're talking about this specific kill chain, let's, for this example, say that we caught a password dumper on a host. And this kind of brings up an interesting problem, because I used to run a cyber threat intelligence mission, and I was asked by customers all the time, as a cyber threat intelligence mission that's chartered with detecting the most advanced threats on the market, how do you sleep at night, right? Knowing all the challenges out there and how the attackers evolve and the new tools and techniques they're developing, how do you sleep at night? And this is essentially how we did that. Is my commitment to the organization was not to detect every threat all the time. My commitment to the organization was to detect a threat in every kill chain, no exceptions to that rule. And so in this case, we're going to take a single threat that has been detected in the kill chain and talk about what we would do with that, right? Because it's different at DeepSeas. At another vendor, what you might see is if a password dumper was detected on a host, they might turn that into a notification for the customer. And at that point, the discussion would be over, right? They would high-five themselves, they would high-five the customer and move on. At DeepSeas, a lot of us have been on your side of the table, and we understand that that's not the end of the problem, that's really the beginning of the problem. And so we're going to ask ourselves those hard problems, so essentially you don't have to. Because we're going to ask ourselves, where did that password dumper come from, right? It didn't just manifest itself on the host. Someone put it there. And sometimes more importantly, where was it going? Right? If it did exfil those passwords, where was it going to put them? Was it going to put them, was it going to exfil them to an offline password cracker? Was it going to do an online password crack, right? Something like that. And we're going to try to basically pull that kill chain as far forward and as far backward as we can. And the intent here is because there should have been things that were happening before that password dumper showed up on the host. And why didn't we see them, right? So there are some unknowns in this kill chain. And our goal of pulling this kill chain backwards and forwards is to turn those unknowns into knowns. And that's really the critical component here. And I would argue the actual true power of any security team is not in their ability to detect all threats all the time, because we all have to admit, right, we all know there's no silver bullet in cybersecurity. So you have to acknowledge that things will be missed. And so that essentially leaves room for then the true power to become your ability to turn, to pivot from knowns into unknowns. And so one of the most important components of this process that we call analytical pivoting is essentially taking what you've learned from these processes, right, these unknowns that you've turned into knowns, and building them back into your detection tools. So that the next time the attacker comes through, right, if they reused that password dumper, right, we already knew that from the last time, but maybe they reused the same command and control mechanism here. Now we have a different way to detect them, and we're essentially taking a different tactic, a different technique or tool off the table for the attackers. And as long as we continue to pivot and turn these unknowns into knowns, we continue to take tactics and techniques off the table for the attackers. And what that means is if you do this a couple 100,000 times, that the attackers aren't left with many options, because you've taken entire swaths of capability off the table. And that in order for an attacker to be successful in attacking my environment, they cannot reuse a single piece of code, a single tool, or a single technique. And in that truth, what that does is that inverts the scale on the attacker. So by not reusing a single tool or technique, it is very expensive for them to attack my environment because they have to be brand new along every step of the road. And that really, really degrades their ROI. This is really a fundamental difference between some of the tradecraft you're exposed to at DeepSeas and what our customers experience from additional vendors that are out there.